It begins as a quiet ache, a strange homesickness for a place you have never seen, a subtle, persistent feeling that you are an exile in plain sight. You may love this world, its beauty, its moments of joy, but underneath it all, there is a sense of being a visitor, a traveler passing through a grand, beautiful theater, all while knowing deep in your bones that the stage is not your true home. This profound sense of cosmic displacement was not a mystery to men like Edgar Cayce. He saw it as a key signal, a signal that ancient philosophers like Plato described over 2 millennia ago, the soul's faint, haunting memory of a brighter world it once knew. This is not a feeling to be diagnosed. It is evidence to be investigated, evidence suggesting that your deepest intuition is correct, that the material world is a shadow, a reflection of a greater reality. What if this cosmic longing is not a sign that something is wrong with you, but a sign that your soul is finally waking up to its ultimate purpose, to complete its long journey on Earth? This question changes everything. Edgar Cayce was not a philosopher king, nor a guru on a mountaintop. He was a humble photographer from Kentucky, a devout Christian who taught Sunday school his entire life. He was, by all accounts, an ordinary man, which makes the phenomenon of his life all the more extraordinary. He was a walking paradox. Consciously, he was a simple man of faith, but in a self-induced trance, he could access a level of information that seemed to span all of time and space. He became a bridge between two worlds. Crucially, Cayce himself was often startled, even disturbed, by the information that came through him. Concepts like reincarnation and karma directly challenged the foundations of his own Christian faith. He hadn't studied Plato's dialogues on the immortal soul, nor was he a student of the Hindu Upanishads. Yet, from his trance state, he described the same cosmic architecture, the same laws of spiritual cause and effect, the same journey of the soul through cycles of learning. He was not a scholar repeating ancient doctrines. He was an independent witness, a living, breathing validation of a truth that echoes through the ages. He became a living library of cosmic memory, and the information contained within that library presents a radical map of the soul's final chapters on Earth. This internal conflict is, in fact, the very bedrock of his credibility. His conscious mind acted as a permanent skeptical control group against the flood of transcendental data that poured through him. He wasn't trying to build a new religion. He was trying to reconcile the impossible facts of his own life with his deeply held beliefs. He claimed his source was not his own mind, but a universal database of every thought, action, and event, what some ancient traditions called the Book of Life. He was, in essence, a cosmic librarian, accessing a record that existed outside of personal memory, and this is where the investigation becomes truly profound. When Cayce spoke of the soul as a fragment of divine consciousness, trapped in the illusion of matter and slowly reawakening through experience, he wasn't just echoing Plato's doctrine of anamnesis, the idea that all learning is a form of remembering our pre-existent knowledge. He was providing a live demonstration of it. Likewise, when he described the ultimate purpose of this journey as the soul's conscious re-merging with its source, he was articulating, in the language of the American heartland, the foundational principle of Adi Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, the ultimate non-duality of the individual soul Atman and the ultimate reality Brahman. He wasn't a student of these philosophies. He was an unwitting, independent corroborator. He was the human evidence that these ancient maps of consciousness were not abstract theories, but descriptions of a territory that is real and navigable. When the soul begins its final approach, its perception of reality undergoes a fundamental recalibration. Cayce's readings suggest that this isn't a single event, but a series of profound shifts in awareness. These are not merely feelings, they are the evidence of the immortal self beginning to assert its true nature over the temporary personality. The first piece of evidence is the natural fading of worldly ambition. The desperate need for status, for recognition, for more, simply dissolves. This is not apathy. It is the arrival of a quiet, unshakable fullness. The soul stops seeking validation from the outside world because it has begun to remember its own intrinsic, infinite value. This is the very essence of what the sage Adi Shankara called the piercing of Maya, the cosmic illusion. Shankara taught that the material world is like a dream, and our desires are the narrative threads that keep us asleep, convinced the dream is real. When these desires fade, it is the first sign that the dreamer is beginning to awaken. The karmic fuel that powers the engine of rebirth is running out. The second piece of evidence is the birth of a radical, boundary-dissolving empathy. You begin to feel the joy and the suffering of others not as a distant tragedy, but as an intimate, personal experience. The illusion of a separate self begins to crack. This is not a sentimental feeling. It is the direct, lived experience of the central truth of the Upanishads, Tattvam Asi, or Thou art that. You are not separate from the world you observe. The consciousness looking out through your eyes is the same consciousness looking out from every pair of eyes. To harm another is quite literally to harm yourself. This empathy is not a moral achievement. It is a perceptual fact for a soul nearing its graduation. Finally, the most profound evidence emerges. The world itself begins to feel like a shadow. What once seemed so solid, so real, now appears translucent, almost dreamlike. You sense a more vibrant, more fundamental reality shimmering just behind the veil of ordinary perception. This is Plato's allegory of the cave, not as a metaphor but as a lived experience. The soul for lifetimes has been chained, staring at the flickering shadows on the wall, believing them to be the whole of reality. Now, it has begun to turn its head. It has caught a glimpse of the fire, of the true forms casting those shadows. The world no longer holds the same hypnotic power, because the soul remembers the light. This perceptual shift is often accompanied by a dramatic increase in what Carl Jung would later call synchronicity. Events in your life begin to connect in a way that defies mere probability. The right person appears at the perfect moment. A question forms in your mind, only to be answered by a book falling off a shelf. From a materialist perspective, this is mere coincidence. But from the perspective of an awakening soul, it is the direct perception of the hidden machinery of the cosmos. The divisions between inner thought and outer reality begin to blur. Adi Shankara described this from a philosophical standpoint. He argued that the universe is not a collection of separate objects, but a single, unified field of consciousness, Brahman, dreaming itself into existence. For the soul that is still deeply entranced by the dream of Maya, the world appears random and chaotic. But for the soul that is beginning to awaken, the underlying intelligence of the dream, the cosmic script, becomes visible. You are no longer just an actor in the play. You are beginning to sense the presence of the playwright. The synchronicities are whispers from the deeper self, confirming that you are aligned with the cosmic flow. This is why the fear of death also begins to recede. Plato argued in his dialogue, the Phaedo, that the true philosopher is one who practices dying every day. He did not mean this in a morbid sense. He meant that the philosopher's work is to disentangle the soul's identity from the temporary prison of the body and its appetites. As the soul approaches its liberation, this becomes a natural, effortless process. Death is no longer seen as an annihilation, but as a homecoming, a simple transition, like taking off a heavy coat after a long journey in the cold. It is a return to a state of being that is more real, more fundamental, than the physical form it is about to leave behind. If what Cayce, Plato, and Shankara described is true, then we are living in a universe that is radically different from the one we were taught to believe in. It means our lives are not a brief, accidental flash of consciousness in a meaningless cosmos. They are a single, purposeful chapter in an epic of cosmic proportions. This single idea dismantles our greatest fears. The fear of loss, the fear of oblivion, the fear of ultimate meaninglessness. They are all predicated on the belief that this life is all there is. But if we are immortal consciousness, having a temporary human experience, then death is not a period, it is a comma. It is not an end, but a transition to a new phase of learning and existence. This transforms our entire understanding of purpose. Our mission is not to accumulate wealth, fame, or power for a self that will ultimately vanish. Our mission is to learn, to grow, to purify the lens of our perception until we can see the divine light in ourselves and in everything around us. Every act of kindness is no longer just a nice gesture. It is a step towards dissolving the karmic bonds that tie us to the cycle of rebirth. Every moment of selfless love is not just an emotion, it is an alignment with the fundamental energy of the universe. Every challenge, every hardship is not a punishment, but a precisely calibrated lesson designed by a cosmos that wants us to awaken. This perspective doesn't ask us to abandon the world. It asks us to engage with it more deeply, but with a completely different set of motivations. We are here not to take, but to give, not to conquer, but to understand, not to be seen, but to see. If consciousness can exist beyond the brain, if our intuition of a deeper reality is a genuine memory, then the most important question we can ever ask is not, what can I get from the world, but what lesson is my soul here to learn? So, what happens next? What is the ultimate destination for a soul that has completed its curriculum on Earth? In his trance readings, Edgar Cayce provided detailed descriptions of the journey through the interdimensional planes after death, realms of learning, and purification. But when he was pressed to describe the final state, the ultimate return to the source, a fascinating limit was reached. His language, usually so precise, became metaphorical, poetic, paradoxical. He spoke of the soul becoming one with the whole, yet not losing its individuality. He described a state of pure being where all questions are answered, not with words, but with a direct, luminous knowing. This is the exact point where the great philosophers also fall silent, their logic reaching its breaking point. In the Neoplatonic tradition that followed Plato, the philosopher Plotinus described the final ascent of the soul as a journey back to the One, an ultimate reality so simple and absolute that it is beyond all description and attributes. When Plotinus attempts to describe the state of union with the One, his text becomes a cascade of negations. It is not this. It is not that. It is a knowledge so profound that the human mind, an instrument designed to operate within the world of forms and duality, simply cannot process it. Adi Shankara faced the same paradox. He could describe the path to liberation, the state of moksha, in brilliant detail, but the final experience of Brahman itself. He called it neti, neti, not this, not that. Any word you use to describe it, any concept you form of it, is by definition a limitation, and therefore not the thing itself. The ultimate truth is not a concept to be grasped, it is an experience to be dissolved into. The witnesses, ancient and modern, can take us to the very edge of the ocean of infinity, but they cannot describe the water. They can only tell us that the final step of the journey is not a step at all, but a surrender. This wall of silence is not a failure of the mystics or philosophers. It is the most powerful evidence they can offer. It signifies the boundary between the relative world of language and the absolute reality that language points to. Think of it this way. Imagine a two-dimensional being living on a flat plane. You could spend a lifetime trying to explain to them the concept of up. You could use shadows and analogies, but you could never truly convey the experience of the third dimension. Their entire reality is built on length and width. The concept of height is not just unknown, it is fundamentally unimaginable within their framework of existence. Our minds operate in a reality structured by space, time, and causality. The state of ultimate unity that Cayce, Plato, and Shankara point to is a state that transcends these categories. It is a reality where before and after merge into an eternal now, where here and there dissolve into a single, infinite here. When Cayce stated that the soul retains its identity while merging with the whole, he was presenting a paradox that shatters the logic of our world. Here, a drop of water merging with the ocean ceases to be a drop, but in the realm of consciousness, the drop can become the ocean without losing the memory and the wisdom it gathered as a drop. This is why the final state is often described in terms of light, not as a metaphor, but perhaps as the closest physical approximation. A state of pure, intelligent, and blissful energy, a conscious, infinite light, where to see, to know, and to be are all the same action. The great secret, hinted at by all these traditions, is that the journey of reincarnation is not about the soul becoming this light. It is about the soul remembering that it has always been this light, merely dreaming it was something else. Why, if this knowledge is so profound, is it not the central subject of our modern civilization? Why is it relegated to the margins, to esoteric bookshops and late-night philosophical discussions? The answer is simple. These truths pose a direct, existential threat to the dominant paradigm of scientific materialism. This is the worldview that asserts that matter is the primary reality, and consciousness is merely a secondary effect, a complex illusion generated by the chemical reactions inside our brain. From this perspective, the evidence we have been investigating is not evidence at all. It is simply noise. The soul's cosmic homesickness is reduced to a psychological condition. The profound sense of empathy is an evolutionary trick for species survival. The experience of the world as a dream is dismissed as a depersonalization disorder. The case of a man like Edgar Cayce is a profound anomaly that the materialist model simply cannot compute. It has no framework to explain how a man with an 8th grade education could, in a trance, access medical information, historical details, and philosophical concepts far beyond his own knowledge. The attempts to explain away these phenomena are always reductionist. They argue that near-death experiences are simply hallucinations caused by a lack of oxygen to the brain, but this explanation collapses when faced with a critical fact: the verified out-of-body observations made by people who were clinically dead. How could a hallucinating brain accurately perceive a specific surgical tool being used, or a conversation happening in a distant waiting room? The truth is, the materialist paradigm ignores this evidence, not because the evidence is weak, but because the paradigm is rigid. It has built its entire model of reality on the premise that the brain creates the mind. Any data point that suggests the mind can exist independently of the brain must be rejected, because to accept it would be to admit that the entire foundation of their model is, at best, incomplete, and at worst, fundamentally wrong. This isn't a scientific debate. It is a battle of cosmic territory. We are told we are biological machines in a dead universe. The evidence from Plato to Cayce suggests we are immortal explorers on a journey of cosmic awakening. You cannot unsee this evidence. Once you have seriously considered the possibility that your life is more than a biological accident, the world never looks the same way again. A door has been opened in your mind, and it cannot be fully closed. This is not a call to adopt a new religion or to abandon critical thinking. It is an invitation to begin your own investigation, to treat your own life, your own consciousness, as the ultimate field of discovery. Pay attention to the moments of profound synchronicity. Honor the deep intuitive feeling that you are more than your name, your job, and your history. Explore the wisdom of the great philosophical traditions not as ancient relics, but as living manuals for the journey of the soul. The path to awakening does not demand that you leave the world, but that you see it with new eyes. To see every interaction as a potential lesson, every person as a fellow traveler, and every moment as an opportunity to remember who you truly are. If this investigation has expanded your sense of what is possible, leave a like, not for an algorithm, but as a quiet signal to yourself and others that your mind is open to the great mystery. Subscribe if you are ready to explore the next piece of this cosmic puzzle. The great exploration is not out there among the stars. It is in here, within the silent, infinite space of your own consciousness, and it has only just begun.